Hello traders, you're welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to be talking about pivot points. Okay, so for those who are fans of pivot points, or for those who like using pivot points to determine both exit and entry points, or if you're using an indicator that is related to pivot points, or if your strategy somehow revolves around pivot points, or if you are an enthusiast of pivot points, whatsoever may be the case, we're just going to be looking at how to calculate pivot points in this video. Maybe you have been wondering how that is being done. You don't have to worry anymore, because we're going to be looking at that in this video. Okay, so to calculate pivot points quickly and easily, you can follow this simple formula. We're just going to be looking at a couple of formulas that you can use to calculate pivot points. Okay, pivot points help identify key levels in the market that might act as support or resistance, and it can help you to improve your trade setups. Okay, so stick around as we look into how to calculate pivot points in this video. Okay, so basically the pivot point is calculated as the average of the previous day's high, low, and close prices. So we're just going to be going to the daily time frame. Remember that in the daily time frame, each candlestick represents 1 day. Okay, each candlestick represents 1 day, and just for a little bit of an explanation, we have for a bearish candle, we have the open price to be the top of the body and the close price to be the down of the body, right? And then we have a wick below the body and a wick above the body. So the highest point of the wick represents the high of that candlestick. The lowest point of the wick represents the low of that candlestick. So we have the open, the high, the low, and the close, right? Now for a bullish candle, it's just the opposite, right? So we have the body of the candle, we have the open price below the body, at the bottom of the body rather, and we have the close price at the top of the body, and at the bottom of the wick we have the low, at the top of the wick we have the high. So we have the open, high, low, close. Okay, so that is how it is. Now the pivot point is calculated as the average of the previous day's high, low, that is the high, the low, and the close prices. Okay, so let's say this is the new day. So we're going to be, if we want to calculate pivot points, it's going to be the figures of the previous day. Okay, so I'm just going to write out the formula for that. Let's say we have P as the pivot point, right? We have P as the pivot point. Now that P is equal to high plus low plus close, right, divided by divided by 3. Okay, so I'm just using the text tool to write this. So the pivot point P is calculated as the average of the previous day's high, low, and close. Okay, so we have the previous day. For example, say the previous day is, let's look at, just look below, you would see the OHLC. You can see the OHLC right about this place, right? So let's just use this as the previous day. So we have the high as let's just assume it's okay, let's use the exact figures, 27 27.22, 27.22 is our high. Then our low is 26.92.28, 26.92.28, and then our close is 27.21.38, 27.21.38. Now remember, we are finding the average, right? So the average is going to be divided by 3. Okay, now we have 2712.06. So 2712.06, 2712.06, 2712.06. So we just calculated the pivot point for this particular day. Say this was our candlestick that we used to calculate the pivot points. So we got this figure for the pivot point. So once you have the pivot point, you can calculate the support and resistance levels also. Now, as for the support and resistance levels, the first resistance being the R1 is equal to the, let us just write that also. So we have the first resistance, which is going to be R1. We have it as 2 times P, okay, minus the low. Okay, this is for the first resistance. Remember that this P indicates our pivot point, right? So we're going to be using this figure because that is what we calculated just now. Just using that figure for our pivot point. Okay, now as for the first support is the formula for the first support is as follows. The first support, which is going to be S1, we have it as 2 times P minus high. Okay, all right. Now as for our second resistance, we have our second resistance as, which is going to be L2. We have it as P plus high minus low. Okay, so basically this is how we calculate the second resistance. It's P plus high minus low. Okay, now as for the second support, the formula is as follows. The second support, which is going to be S2, the second support, which is going to be S2, is equal to P minus high minus low. Okay, now these are the formulas. Okay, these are the formulas. So now we're just going to be writing out, because we use this particular candle as to calculate our pivot points, we're just going to be writing out the high, the low, and the close for that particular candle. Okay, so our high is 2722.52, 2722.52, right? This is our high. Then our low is, let us check what our low is. Our low is 2692.28, 2692.28. Our low is 2692.28. right? Then our close, finally, our close is 2721.38, 2721.38, 2721.38. Okay. Now these are the values that we use to calculate the pivot point. Okay. So we are working with this particular candlestick. Now, if we want to make the calculations, we're just going to be having for our first resistance, if we want to calculate the first resistance using these values, these figures, what we're going to be having is first resistance is equals to 2 multiplied by the pivot point. Remember that this is the pivot point. Okay, let me just write it down. Let me write it there. Pivot point. Okay, which is P equal to this. So this is the pivot point. So now first resistance is going to be 2 multiplied by this minus our low. Okay, so we have 2 multiplied by 2712.06 divided by our low. Okay, minus 2 multiplied by our pivot points minus our low, which is 2692.28. We have 2731.84. 2731.84. 2731.84. Okay, so using this as our pivot point, using this as our low, we had this value when calculating the first resistance using this candlestick. Okay, now as for our first support, our pivot point remains 2712.06. So we're just going to be having 2 multiplied by 2712.06, right? Minus our high, which is 2722.52. So we're going to be having 2701.6. Okay, we're going to having 2701.6. Okay, that's going to be our first support. Now let us calculate the second resistance. Our second resistance is P plus high minus low. So our high is 2722.52 minus our low is 2692.28. Now adding the pivot points to that, we have plus 2712.06. So we're going to be having is 2742.3. 2742.3. Okay, 2742.3. So that becomes our second resistance. That becomes our second resistance. Now as for our second support, we're just going to be having the pivot point minus the high minus the low. So we have our high as 2722.52 minus our low is 2692.28. Now we're just going to subtract our pivot point from, we're going to subtract this figure 30.24 from our pivot point. Okay, so we're going to be having 2712.06 minus 30.24. 2712.06 minus 30.24. So we have 2681.82. 2681.82. So we have 2681.82. Okay, so that becomes our second support. Okay, so we have been able to successfully calculate the first resistance, the first support, the second resistance, and the second support using this candlestick for our reference, using that candlestick as our reference. Okay, now how do you use pivot points for trading? Resistance levels act as potential barriers where the price may struggle to move higher, creating selling opportunities. So having calculated the first resistance and the second resistance, we can know the possible level where price could face rejection. Okay? We could know the possible levels where price could face rejection at the next day, because we have already calculated the first resistance 37.31. That should be somewhere around here, right? And then the second resistance, we calculated it. Let's just add that to our chart, shall we? Let us add let's add the levels. It might not be exactly the same figure, but at least it should be very close. 27.31. Let's just go to 27.31. Okay, so the first resistance is somewhere around here. Our second resistance is somewhere around 27.42. Okay, our second resistance is somewhere around 27.42. Okay, all right. So at the start of the next day or within the next trading day, we could see possible rejections around these zones. Okay, now as for our first support, we have it around 2701.6. We have it around 2701.6. Okay, and then we have our second support around 2681. 27.1. Yeah. Then we have second support around 2681.82. Okay, all right. So within the next trading day, there are chances of price seeing possible rejections around these zones that we just calculated. Okay, possible rejections around these zones. Okay, so because these levels act as potential barriers where price may struggle to move higher, that's for the resistance, while the support, they can serve as zones where the price might find a floor, giving buying opportunities. So there could be possible buying opportunities around here and here, possible selling opportunities around here and here. Okay, so basically that is how the pivot point works. So when prices approach these levels, they might either reverse or break through, giving you signals for entering or exiting trades. By using pivot points, you can predict potential market turning points and refine your trading strategy. Okay, and that can help you to get more precise trade setups. So I hope you found this video insightful. Kindly like, subscribe, and share to those who you feel are also going to find it insightful. Thanks for watching. Happy trading.